What is up, everyone? This is Jay reminding you to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Plus, make sure to post a comment telling us your location or simply write that you are doing your part to support the channel. It was exactly 4:48 in the morning on June 10th, 2016, when Colorado law enforcement in Larimer County sent out a critical warning. 18-year-old Ashley Doolittle had vanished and was likely in peril. A rare early morning announcement given she had only been absent for a short time. Although she was supposed to return by 7:30 the previous evening, authorities had strong justification for their panic. She had just split from Tanner Flores, also 18, and detectives believed he had her in his company and was carrying a gun. As the sun came up, a desperate manhunt began while the close town prepared for bad news, which unfortunately arrived all too quickly. A violent murder stole the promising future of this popular rodeo queen who was a famous face around her home in Berthoud, Colorado. She was a talented equestrian and rodeo royalty known for her contagious grinning. Selected as the lady-in-waiting for the Boulder County Fair and Rodeo, she was set to take the crown as queen in 2017. Since she was a little girl, she loved horses and had secured several championship titles for her riding skills. At 18, fresh out of high school, she had earned a spot in the agricultural business major at Colorado State University, starting that autumn. Tanner Flores and Ashley had been dating during high school for roughly 12 months. However, she decided to call it quits as she focused on her university plans and the fresh start awaiting her. While breakups happen to everyone and are pretty standard, this one crushed Flores completely. Peers would eventually tell police that they had never witnessed him in such a low state before. Then on June 8th, he sent out a message on Snapchat late at night, suggesting he planned to take his own life. That same day, he had snooped through her cell phone and got angry over texts she exchanged with other guys. Violating her boundaries caused a massive fight that permanently ended their rocky dating history. Filled with pain and rage, Flores spent the next few hours cooking up a twisted scheme. Come June 9th, 2016, he kept begging Ashley to see him, claiming he just wanted closure. He sneaked his dad's handgun out of a cabinet that morning and drove to Carter Lake to practice shooting it. Occupied with rodeo duties early on, she consented to see him that evening, meeting him at a Lon Hagler Reservoir lot in Loveland for what she thought would be a peaceful chat. Rather than talking, he transported her to a lonely area by Carter Lake, pretending they needed privacy to speak. As soon as she attempted to exit the vehicle, he slammed on the accelerator to stop her from leaving. Furious, he reached for the concealed gun behind the seat and fired at close range right there in the cab. He pulled the trigger several times, hitting her in the head on 2 occasions. Just like that, the lively rodeo champion was murdered by the one individual she used to rely on above all others. Her relatives realized something was amiss right away when she did not come back on June 9th. Her mom called the Larimer County Sheriff late that evening to file a report after discovering her daughter's vehicle left empty at the reservoir. That was the exact location where she planned to see Flores, which triggered instant concern. Deputies soon found out that Flores was gone too, and that a gun had disappeared from his dad's house. Terrified of the potential outcome, officials sent out that unusual early morning warning. Teams were deployed to locate them, and that hard work yielded results in just a few hours. At 8 a.m., on June 10th, police tracked his truck to an isolated ranch, almost 300 miles distant in Colburn, Colorado. A neighbor near that land, which used to belong to his late grandpa and sat empty, noticed the white pickup parked there and saw something truly unsettling. She watched a guy who looked like Tanner Flores take a rolled-up quilt from the back of the cab and place it on the dirt. To her horror, a human arm appeared to be sticking out of the wrap, which was all the proof Mesa County deputies needed. Tactical units from the sheriff's office sped to the location and surrounded the area. They observed him walking around the property, at one point throwing bloody cloths into the grass. At roughly 10:30, the team advanced and arrested him without incident. Their nightmare became reality when they found Ashley deceased inside a comforter in the pickup bed. During interrogation, he first pretended it was an accidental killing, but quickly changed his story to admit he shot her on purpose. Court documents state he confessed to pulling the trigger because he was mad at her, detailing the slaying near Carter Lake. Afterward, he transported her remains over to his grandfather's empty property. Once there, he attempted to wash away the evidence before placing her back inside his vehicle. According to his own account, he stayed at the Colbrand residence for hours with the victim, actually laundering her clothes and dressing her again before the sun came up on June 10th. He eventually moved the corpse back into his pickup truck, right before the authorities closed the net around him. Deputies officially took him into custody on murder charges, turning what started as a missing persons report into a major homicide investigation. The proceedings against Tanner Flores kicked off in late September of 2017 in Larimer County, capturing the attention of the entire community. In a dramatic turn, the defendant elected to testify on his own behalf during the week-long hearing. He broke down in tears while confessing to pulling the trigger, though he maintained that killing her was never part of the plan. His legal team doubled down on that narrative, claiming the shooting wasn't premeditated and begging the jury to come back with a reduced conviction. The prosecution, on the other hand, painted a much darker picture, laying out proof that this was a carefully orchestrated execution. Between the stolen firearm and the manipulative text messages used to lure her out, everything suggested a calculated attack born from jealousy. Following 6 days of witness testimony, the jurors didn't need much time behind closed doors to decide his fate. On October 4th, 2017, the panel returned a verdict of guilty on every single count. Just 19 years old, the young man who stole Ashley's future was now staring down the barrel of a lifetime behind bars. He was hauled back into court the very next day for sentencing, where state laws required a mandatory life term for first-degree murder. The presiding judge handed down a sentence of life without parole, tacking on another 32 years for the kidnapping offense. The gallery was packed with Ashley's relatives as her mother, Ann Doolittle, read a heartbreaking impact statement regarding their devastating loss. She spoke about how his selfish choices had stripped their family of a cherished daughter and erased all the future memories they should have made. Everything from walking down the aisle to the mundane little joys of daily life. Despite her agony, Ann showed incredible grace toward the killer. She addressed the courtroom, noting that nobody won in this situation and that 2 separate families had been effectively shattered. She even offered condolences to the Flores family, acknowledging that they were also losing a son since his life as a free man was finished. Wearing an orange prison uniform and restraints, Flores refused the chance to make a statement when the judge offered him the floor. You simply cannot look at the Ashley Doolittle case without being overwhelmed by how completely avoidable and tragic it was. This wasn't a crime of passion where tempers flared in the moment, nor was it a destiny that anyone could have predicted. Ashley was just an 18-year-old girl with the world at her feet, ending a relationship because she was ready to evolve and move on. She was prepared to turn the page and start fresh. That is a completely normal and healthy part of growing up. Breaking up with a high school sweetheart after graduation is practically a universal experience for young adults. The crime stemmed entirely from one individual's inability to accept rejection or allow his partner to have autonomy. He was a person who had displayed red flags for quite some time, proving to be emotionally volatile and dangerously obsessive. In many respects, Tanner was a walking powder keg, and the breakup wasn't the root cause, it was merely the spark. The threat was always lurking beneath the surface long before she decided to leave, and that is the detail that truly haunts me. None of this was necessary. It never should have occurred. She did absolutely nothing wrong by making a mature decision. Sadly, another person's refusal to respect that decision spiraled into a horrific nightmare. What's up, guys? It is Jay here, reminding you to smash that subscribe button, ring the bell, and make sure all notifications are toggled on. Don't forget to take a look at the membership perks by hitting join or checking out the Patreon link down in the description box. On a typical fall evening in October of 2012, 19-year-old Lizzie Marriott clocked out of work and drove toward Dover, New Hampshire to see a friend. She told her folks she would be back by midnight, but that was the last time anyone ever saw her. A few days later, the search for the missing college sophomore went into overdrive, quickly uncovering a grim reality. What investigators found was a sickening story involving manipulation, lies, and brutal violence. The very same ocean waters she studied and adored as a marine biology major ended up being the concealment site for a heinous crime. Lizzie was a well-liked student at UNH who lived off campus with her aunt and uncle. On the night of October 9th, 2012, after finishing her classes, she informed her family about plans to visit a new pal and return late. She drove from the university to the apartment of 18-year-old Kat McDonough, a friend and colleague in Dover. Kat shared that residence with her boyfriend, a 30-year-old man named Seth Mazzaglia. When Lizzie didn't return home or report for her shift the following morning, her loved ones immediately knew something was wrong. Come October 11th, the campus was plastered with flyers as everyone searched frantically for any trace of her. Friends tipped off the cops that she planned to visit Kat's place that night, which her phone records confirmed. Investigators followed that lead and grilled the couple on October 12th, but their stories didn't match up at all. She swore the girl never showed up, but he eventually cracked and confessed that she had been there and was dead. Based on his confession, the team went out to scour the banks of the Piscataqua River. They focused on a spot at Pearce Island in Portsmouth, where he claimed they had dumped the body. By October 13th, officials announced she was likely gone and arrested Seth Mazzaglia for the murder. With him in handcuffs, everyone looked to Kat McDonough to see what really went down in that apartment. A quick check of the trash bins nearby turned up clues like gloves and some of the victim's clothes. She later admitted those gloves were on Seth's hands when he choked the life out of the girl, proving it was planned. Lab tests also picked up DNA from both of them on the items, proving there had been a sexual assault. It turned out the couple had messed around with the physical evidence to cover their tracks. Detectives found out they used her phone to send fake texts as an alibi before wiping it clean. At first, she stuck to her story, telling a lawyer it was an accident during a consensual act between the women. She walked free for 2 months while the victim's family begged for answers and justice. Then on December 24th, 2012, cops arrested her for lying and covering up the crime. The 19-year-old was facing heavy charges for hindering the prosecution and tampering with witnesses. She took a plea deal in 2013, agreeing to testify against him to get a shorter sentence. She ended. She took the stand and claimed Seth forced her to trap an unsuspecting girl to satisfy his twisted urges. Lizzie showed up at the apartment thinking they were just going to hang out and watch a film. But when Seth tried to make a move, she shut him down, and he snapped into a violent rage. Kat told the court that he wrapped a rope around the girl's neck and squeezed the life out of her. He kept hurting her even after she went still, while Kat stood by, too paralyzed by fear to stop him. Once the deed was done, the pair worked systematically to clean up the mess they had made. They took a ride out to Portsmouth and tossed her remains into the water near a secluded area on Pearce Island. After ditching the weapon and other proof in random trash cans, they left her vehicle back at the school. That explains why nobody ever found her body, no matter how hard the search teams looked. The tide likely swept her out to sea, and by May 2014, the trial started with the state leaning hard on Kat's story. For nearly 2 weeks, she sat there explaining their toxic dynamic and exactly what happened the night Lizzie died. The legal team backed up her words with hard proof found at the scene. They had DNA matches, a glove, and even disturbing notes written by the defendant himself. His letters painted a picture of a guy who wanted total, ruthless ownership over his girlfriend. A specialist also explained to the jury how she might have been too scared and isolated to fight back. Seth decided not to speak up for himself, so the jury only really had her version of events to go on. His lawyers pushed a totally separate theory, arguing that she was a liar and the death was just a horrible mistake. They insisted the girls were engaging in consensual fun when things went wrong. The claim was that his only crime was getting rid of the evidence because he wanted to protect his girlfriend. To prove this, they pointed out that she originally told police on camera that it was an accidental choking. They noted she stuck to that script even when she had the chance to come clean to the cops. Following barely 48 hours of reviewing the facts, on June 27, 2014, the jury delivered their final decision, guilty on every single charge. Mazzaglia was found guilty of first-degree murder, along with a secondary count for killing the victim during a criminal assault. The judge handed down the mandatory penalty of life behind bars, with absolutely no chance of parole. At the hearing in August 2014, Lizzie's weeping family told Mazzaglia about the agony he caused. When finally granted an opportunity to address the court, Mazzaglia maintained his innocence regarding Lizzie's fate. His only expression of remorse concerned the concealment of her passing, a stance that failed to sway the judge who handed down the mandatory life term. Today, Mazzaglia sits behind bars where he will spend the rest of his natural days. In stark contrast, Kat McDonough walked free in 2016, sparking outrage among those who believed her penalty was far too lenient. Surprisingly, the victim's parents have extended a certain amount of grace and understanding toward Kat, largely due to their belief that she was operating under Seth's intense psychological control. It is worth mentioning that Mazzaglia attempted a wild jailbreak before his trial began, a failed plot that only piled more legal trouble onto his plate. Tragic as it is, authorities were never able to retrieve Lizzie Marriott's remains from the river. Lacking a final resting place, her loved ones established a memorial bench by a peaceful lakeside in Massachusetts to honor her memory. From my perspective, the punishment handed down to Kat McDonough seems incredibly insufficient. I know that opinion might ruffle some feathers, so allow me to elaborate, because I definitely acknowledge the severe influence Seth held over her. Toxic dynamics involving coercion can warp someone's reality until they can no longer distinguish right from wrong. Yet, despite the psychological pressure, she still possessed the agency to make different decisions. There were distinct opportunities where she could have halted the tragic chain of events, such as telling Lizzie to simply stay home that evening. She had the chance to step out the door and dial 911 or contact a friend to say that things were going sideways. Rather than acting, she assisted in drawing Lizzie into the trap, remained passive during the assault, and actively helped scrub the crime scene. Numerous exit points existed where she could have preserved a life, or at least ensured the family had a body to bury. I understand that her cooperation was pivotal, and why the state felt compelled to cut a deal for her testimony. However, legal utility does not wash away the moral weight of what she actually did. Securing a conviction against Seth would have been tough without her or the remains, yet helping afterwards fails to rectify the betrayal when Lizzie desperately needed an ally. The fact that she did such minimal time before walking free to hit the reset button on her existence, while the Marriott family remains permanently bereft of their child, is a disparity I find impossible to reconcile. It truly seems as though the consequences she faced never equaled the horrific nature of the events she facilitated. Joyce McLean, just 16 years old, was the type of youngster who brought immense pride to the tight-knit community of East Millinocket, Maine. She possessed both a sharp intellect and an abundance of natural gifts. At Schenck High School, she thrived as a well-liked cheerleader, a high-achieving scholar, and a dedicated musician. Showing remarkable musical talent since childhood, she loved writing original music and was currently buzzing about her new license and upcoming 17th birthday bash. As her mother, Pam, would later describe, the teenager was absolutely thrilled to be embarking on this exciting new chapter of adolescence. Tragically, that promising future would be stolen before she ever had the chance to live it. On a balmy night, August 8, 1980, Joyce laced up her sneakers for a run to prepare for the approaching soccer schedule. Departing her house at approximately 7:30 in the evening, she jogged toward the school athletic fields and was last spotted fading into the dusk. That fleeting glimpse would mark the final time anyone ever saw the young girl alive. When she didn't show up later, her mother panicked and cruised the neighborhood searching, but the teen had simply disappeared. Law enforcement was notified immediately, sparking a frantic 48-hour search where neighbors and kin scoured the area for clues. Then, on the morning of Sunday, August 10th, 1980, a local volunteer stumbled upon a nightmare that would shake the town to its core. The cold remains of the teenager were located in a wooded stretch near the power lines, just beyond the high school sports complex. She had suffered a catastrophic injury to the head, caused by a massive blunt force impact. Her wrists were bound behind her with fabric, and ligature marks on her neck indicated she had been choked with some sort of device. Although her garments were disheveled, the medical examiner concluded that no sexual violation had taken place. That gruesome find instantly fractured the sense of safety that defined the quiet hamlet of East Millinocket. In a community where locking doors was unheard of, terror took hold as neighbors looked at one another with suspicion and dread. Pam McLean begged the public for leads, swearing a solemn oath that she would not rest and neither would the killer until justice was served. And let me tell you, that was a promise she fully intended to keep, no matter how long it took. Detectives hit immediate roadblocks, though they did conclude that the murder likely occurred on the very evening she disappeared. Aside from that timeline, physical proof was thin, yet one specific individual quickly surfaced as a person of interest. Then there was Scott Fournier, who was just 19 years old at the time. In the early morning darkness, right after Joyce vanished, Fournier stole a fuel truck from a local shop and wrecked it nearby, suffering a severe head injury. He lay in a coma for weeks, and once he finally woke up, he swore he didn't remember a single thing about that night. But come May of 1981, he told police something that sounded like a confession, admitting he might have beaten Joyce while in a drunken haze. Just a few days later, though, he took the whole story back. He claimed it was just a nightmare, which actually seemed reasonable considering the severity of his brain trauma. As the years rolled on, however, Fournier kept making disturbing comments regarding the murder. He supposedly confessed to a minister and his own parents back in the 80s, and later on, he even told a buddy at work that he killed her. Sometimes he tried to pin the blame on other guys during these retellings, but detectives eventually cleared every name he dropped. The real kicker was that Fournier knew specific facts about the crime scene that had never been released to the public. For instance, he described exactly how Joyce's hands had been tied behind her back. Even so, without physical evidence or a story that stuck, the police couldn't pin charges on Fournier or anyone else. By the time the mid-80s rolled around, the trail for Joyce McLean had gone ice cold. For more than 30 years, the neighborhood and Joyce's family fought for justice, with her mom Pam refusing to let the authorities forget. They started a committee for Joyce and gathered for candlelight vigils every time a major anniversary came up on the calendar. Finally, in 2008, almost 28 years after the tragedy, things shifted. All that relentless pressure from Pam finally forced a major turning point. That year, thanks to community donations, they managed to have Joyce's remains exhumed for a modern forensic look. Famous experts Dr. Michael Baden and Dr. Henry Lee ran a new autopsy and claimed they found physical clues that gave everyone hope. They kept a tight lid on what they found, but it felt like the biggest break the case had seen in decades. Honestly, nobody is entirely sure what that evidence was, but I am jumping the gun a little bit here. Looking back, it is probably safe to assume that the discovery wasn't the smoking gun everyone thought it was. That being said, stirring up fresh publicity has a funny way of shaking the truth loose. If they hadn't chased that dead end, there is a good chance Fournier would have walked free forever. Because of that exhumation, the Maine State Police decided to crack the investigation open again. Starting in 2008, detectives went back to square one, grilling witnesses and reviewing the files from scratch. By 2009, officials publicly confirmed that Fournier, who had been on their radar for ages, was a person of interest. Once the cold case team started digging, new people came forward, including an old co-worker of Fournier's who had a story to tell. Apparently, way back in 1989, Fournier had randomly blurted out a confession to the guy while they were working. Tips like that, mixed with the renewed forensic interest, slowly built a circumstantial wall around Fournier piece by piece. After grinding away for years, the legal team decided they finally had enough goods to secure a conviction. On March 4, 2016, nearly 36 years post-crime, troopers arrested 55-year-old Fournier and charged him. He finally stood trial in January of 2018. Interestingly, he waived his right to a jury, leaving his fate entirely in the hands of a judge. His lawyers likely did that as a strategy, considering how many times he had confessed over the years. They figured a judge would be more likely to see his statements as the result of brain damage rather than actual memories of a murder. Since you are watching a video about solved cases and not unsolved mysteries, you know where this is going. I don't need to spell out for you how that legal strategy ended up playing out for him. Since there was basically zero physical proof tying him to the crime, the state used Fournier's own words against him. They brought in witnesses to testify about the multiple times he had confessed throughout the years. They also highlighted the intimate details he knew about the scene that only the real killer would know. The defense argued that these so-called admissions were just the unreliable ramblings of a man with serious brain damage. His attorneys suggested that his memories were just confused or totally imagined. They even tried to point the finger at other potential suspects to create doubt. After listening to 2 weeks of testimony, Justice Anne Murray handed down her verdict on February 22, 2018. She declared Scott Fournier guilty in the Joyce McLean tragedy, ending a mystery that had plagued the county for almost 38 years. Justice Murray sentenced him to a term of 45 years in state prison. Back in 2019, the Supreme Court of Maine affirmed the conviction, ensuring Fournier would remain incarcerated. At long last, the promise of justice for Joyce was kept, solving the cold case after a decades-long crusade for accountability.